Well, Joe, it's such a privilege to flip seats, right? As a professor, to have your former student you learn from, that's absolutely amazing. So we're just so proud of everything that you've done and that you continue to do for Georgetown and the McDonough School. I also want to thank you for serving on the board of the Pissarro Center for Financial Markets and Policy. Let me start with sort of a big picture question, and you mentioned that in the video. Private equity and finance more broadly, a lot of people will say these are just greedy people. They're out there to squeeze jobs, they're out there to make profits. How do you respond to that? How does private equity actually help the global society? Whether it's innovation, whether it's job creation, whether it's economic growth, what role does private equity play in this broader economy?
Well, it's an important question, Rina. Thank you for starting with it, because I think it's, particularly in this politically charged climate that we're in, never more so in history, really, at least that I can remember. Business has become part of that politicization, and I would say private equity at the sharp edge of capitalism is on the receiving end of much criticism, some of which may be fair, but much of which I think is uninformed. As I said in the unfortunate video that was shown, which is all of this sort of laudatory stuff is not what I love, but anyway, we invest on behalf of nearly 40 million retirees to help ensure their retirement. So the California teachers, the state of Washington, my brother's a police officer in Portland, Oregon. I have a small part in managing his pension. Sovereign wealth funds in Korea, in Singapore, in Canada. This is for whom we're investing. And this is what I think about every day when we're looking at buying companies, making investments is this going to further the security of these pensioners? And are we going to do it in a way that we're proud of? I mean, Blackstone has been around for 37 going on 38 years for a reason, not because we buy companies and leave them to die. It's because we buy companies to invest in them and make them better. Jack, you mentioned Merlin, which in 2005, Merlin, this small little business that had 20 aquariums in the London Dungeon in the UK. I don't know if you've ever been there in London. It's kind of corny. But we backed a young, ambitious CEO named Nick Varney, who just retired from Merlin after almost 40 years this year, to build a global visitor attraction business with real scale, something that didn't really exist outside of the large corporates like Disney and Universal. We acquired the Legoland theme parks from, you won't believe it, but back then, Lego, the toy company, which was manufacturing, to talk about globalization, plastic bricks in Denmark and in Switzerland. They were running out of money, and they had yet found the great benefit of affiliating with great IP like Star Wars and Harry Potter and other things, and they were just reliant on enforcing patent protections to ensure other toy companies didn't make plastic bricks. So they found themselves in a difficult position as a company. They had built these 4 theme parks. They didn't know how to run theme parks. They needed cash. So backing Merlin, we bought the Legoland business from Lego, which was to this day, a family-owned business. The family took back a 30% stake in the Merlin entity. And since then, and we still own Merlin today, to talk about short-termism in investing, we've owned this company for nearly 20 years now. And I mean, there were some things in between that happened, but we still own it. There are now, instead of 4 Legoland parks that we bought in 2005, there are now close to 12. There's something called the Legoland Discovery Center, which is a mall-based experience, shorter-term stay. And Merlin itself has grown to be the largest visitor attraction company next to Disney, employing many tens of thousands of people, deploying billions and billions of dollars of capital in new attractions, in corporate infrastructure. And so this is what private equity is about. Along the way, for the great teachers of the state of California, we made almost $2 billion of profit, which is fantastic for them. But we created a company that really could not have existed without the involvement of private equity. Who is going to do that? Who is going to back this young CEO in this little company in Britain with 100 million pounds of enterprise value and about 14 million pounds of EBITDA into what today will do this year over 600 million pounds of EBITDA and is a globally important company. And so that's what private equity actually is. Yes, there are examples from some firms that don't aspire to be institutions like Blackstone that may act less responsibly. But in the mainstream, private equity is great for its investors, and it's good for the communities and the employees of those companies.
So we're talking about the future of private equity. The last decade has been pretty unusual. We've had very low cost of capital and low inflation, low interest rates, a lot of dry powder, and mostly driven, I would say, by the role that the central banks globally have played. What about the next 10, 15 years? I'm not thinking just tomorrow and next year, but next 10, 15 years. What are major changes? Is it regions? Is it sectors? Is it valuation? What's going to be happening in the next decade?
I'd say the last, up until the end of 2021, 8 or so years from 2013 until the end of 2021 were the most difficult time I've had as an investor. And I've been doing this now at Blackstone for 25 years and private equity for 27 years, and this will be my 30th anniversary from graduating from Georgetown. There was a completely artificial market that was made by the Federal Reserve and then in COVID by the federal government, literally sending money to people, which created distortions in investment valuations, in growth rates of companies, and importantly, large-scale misallocation of capital to increasingly riskier investments, which crescendoed in growth equity and SPACs and venture capital valuations and even private equity valuations for more mature businesses. That wasn't sustainable, and we were trying to compete as more. I studied from great people like you and Ricardo and others about how you value a business. I think Dr. Eberhard is here somewhere. I took his finance course. And it really was foundational for the way I thought about investing money. And you had to forget all of those things if you wanted to be a successful investor circa 2017, 2018, which I was refusing to forget. So we were falling behind. Some firms that were investing in growth equity and some of our competitors that were less disciplined and more willing to forget what they had learned as finance students. But I knew deep down that the world would change, that you cannot have a world of a growing economy with negative real interest rates and looming inflation and have that be sustainable. And that would ultimately correct in much higher global cost of capital and a significant decline in valuations, which of course did happen. It just took 5 years longer than I thought. And that was difficult. It was a very difficult moment to be a professional investor. Even though the stuff you bought was worth more, you didn't feel like you had anything to do with that, like you weren't being smart. The rising tide was lifting all boats. That's now over. We're now in a world that looks much more like the world I grew accustomed to, like that I feel comfortable in. Positive real rates, economic volatility, a market risk premium that makes sense, credit spreads that are wider, long-term rates more like 4 or 5%, not 2%. And so we can go back to being more sort of fundamental type investors. Private equity in that last 10 or 15 years has also evolved very significantly. There are industries that you just can't invest in anymore. We haven't invested in bricks and mortar retail or traditional media businesses that have linear media advertising-based models since probably 2005. We don't want to invest in upstream hydrocarbons. We don't want to invest in single-use plastics. We may talk about ESG later, just because they don't have futures. So the types of things that private equity firms are investing in these days is much different than it would have been 20 years ago. The whole software asset class was deemed sort of uninvestable until some really clever people, Robert Smith at Vista, Orlando Bravo, who we were analysts together at Morgan Stanley, sitting in the same cube. He's been much more successful than me, but he's built this amazing firm investing in software buyouts. These are all innovations in private equity over the last 10 or 15 years, and there will be more innovations to come. Our true north is buy great businesses that have a future. So we're not value investors per se. We're not looking to buy things at low multiples of cash flow because we can. We're looking to buy things that have a future that we can improve, that can grow, and ultimately somebody else will want to buy, either the public markets or a corporate buyer after our ownership period. And there will be evolutions in how private equity invests. Just 2 years ago, we did something I never really could have imagined we'd do. We backed two ex-Disney executives, Kevin Mayer and Tom Staggs, both of whom should have been CEO of Disney, to build an independent content creation and commerce company. We started partnering with Reese Witherspoon in her Hello Sunshine production company, which is really the category-defining creator of content for women, content that's created by women for a much broader audience, because Reese couldn't find production companies willing to do that, so she took the mantle herself and over 5 years built a very valuable business. We've now partnered with her, owned control of her business, and we also own a children's content company called Moonbug, whose largest content is Coco Melon, which is largely on YouTube. So this is a new media asset that 10 years ago I don't think we would have contemplated investing in, but because of how content is being delivered, because how filmed entertainment is being made today, we see an opportunity to create value. So yes, the future for private equity I think is quite bright. How we invest will certainly evolve.
Any regions of the world that you're more excited about? You were in London. You went to London very early on in your career. And what does Europe look like? What does Asia look like?
I think Europe is an interesting economy. It's not an innovation economy in the same way that the United States is. It is an environmentalism, I'd say. So we've invested in energy transition, companies that are enabling the transition from hydrocarbon-based electricity to renewable sources. I think Europe does have an edge in developing those technologies and also industrial technology. It doesn't have the content and software and sort of tech innovation that the United States have. The other really interesting part of the world is India. India is an educated, optimistic, capitalistic, friendly economy that has this manifest destiny to grow. And they are becoming a very important partner to large Western firms in the supply of critical human talent services and critical components. We own an electric vehicle component manufacturer that's based in India. We own many IT services, cloud transition, business process outsourcing businesses in India. And I think as globalism does change and our counterparties begin to evolve, I think India is positioned to be a winner in that evolution.
So on a couple of things you've touched about what I'd broadly call ESG, environment, social, and governance. How are you encouraging your portfolio companies to move in that direction and do better, which obviously has a huge impact on the global society?
There's two ways we think about this. Our customers, of course, like I said, the state of California, large sovereign wealth funds care very much about how we invest what we own, as do we. And so there are just certain things we don't want to own, where we don't really want to court controversy. So that's one way to be sort of an ESG investor, is just don't buy the things that aren't ESG friendly, upstream oil and gas, other things. The other way is once we own a business, there are and we own, in my business, there are other businesses in Blackstone that don't own control, but my business is the control investing strategy. We can actually implement certain programs. We have three, which we've started, and it won't be limited to these three. One is on carbon emissions reduction. So we are seeking to reduce carbon emissions in a finite 5-year period of time of 15% across the portfolio. Those targets will grow over time. And ultimately, we would like to be aligned with science-based targets to be, emissions net zero at some point. Secondly, on our boards of directors, we have a mandate to have 1/3 of our directors to be from underrepresented groups in the population. And we have now achieved that, I think, on 98% of our portfolio company boards. And the third thing, which is actually I personally led in part of my other philanthropic effort, is in how does this country create a truly level playing field, is driving a change in how we recruit talent across all of our companies so that we can have access to underrepresented talent pools that historically haven't even had a chance to interview for management level jobs. And we're partnering with Year Up and other community-based organizations that allows our companies to access talent pools that heretofore they haven't had an opportunity to access. There aren't specific numerical targets with that. It's literally changing the job requirements, the schools from which our companies recruit talent to achieve true organic diversity over time in our portfolio. So those are the three initiatives that we're focused on. Now there will be others, but ESG is a central part of how we invest. And of course, you won't read that in the New York Times or the Washington Post, because why would they write something good about finance firms? But these are things that we are doing, and I don't see many public companies out there doing the same things actually.
So you mentioned California pension fund a couple of times, but what about all those other states like Florida and Texas and several other AGs there's a big backlash from some part of the. How do you manage it from a fundraising point of view, from an investment point of view?
Yeah, I think we've been careful, to do things that are incremental and achievable, not radical and unlikely to be achieved. And so, nobody in the state of Florida is against carbon emissions reductions. What they are against is a outright ban on the pumping of hydrocarbons and transporting them around the country, because turns out we still need them to function as an economy. But we're not seeing pressure in that regard because we're not out there making these broad pronouncements and trying to vilify certain industries.
We're in Washington, so I have to ask you this question. Certain regulators, policymakers, they see private equity as this dark market, not enough transparency, and there've been all kinds of proposals put out there in terms of what should happen in terms of regulation of private equity. Do you see a part where, maybe more disclosure is required, and then other proposals that have come up that just don't make sense?
Yes, we are a large and important part of the financial markets, and there should be scrutiny applied to what we do and the disclosures we make. And that scrutiny has increased really very significantly over the last 30 years. And I think that's right and that's justified. But to a limit, I mean, we have private companies, not public companies. And so holding private equity and private equity's portfolio to public company disclosure standards would defeat the purpose of being private in the first place. Otherwise, everything might as well just be public. So I think there are certain things to a limit where it becomes no longer a protection for the investors, which is really what the SEC is there for, is to protect investors, to shed a light on what we charge, how we charge the fees, having our counterparties know about, and that all has been done, and I think is very well understood. General performance metrics, how we report our IRRs and net multiples of money. Those are all things that need to be conformed, audited, which of course we're a public company ourselves, so we are audited and held to the highest level of scrutiny. So I believe that there should be transparency in private markets, and there is. The issue that starts to come into play is considering financial firms like Blackstone systemically important. We're not taking depositors' money, and buying, mortgages or, companies with it. We are taking money from pension plans who want exposure to the private equity asset class that have willingly locked up their money for decades to have us invest on their behalf. So there is complete alignment between what we're investing in and what our customers want us to invest in. And they're allocating us relatively small portions of their portfolio because they know it is, on average, a riskier enterprise than just investing in 10-year treasuries or in mortgages or something. So I think that's where the regulatory scrutiny becomes, I think, no longer necessary or efficient for the system.
So a last question before we make sure we open it up to questions from the audience. You gave a talk at commencement at the McDonough School, and you talked about the Georgetown factor and how it has impacted you. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what this Georgetown factor is?
Yeah, well, I think Georgetown graduates are distinctive. And as you can see that manifested in what Anna said, grit and honesty. I think these days, it's so hard to get into Georgetown. We're talking about admissions the other day. We have 12% admissions rate or something. And if you use the Common App, it would be 4%. We're interviewing people in the audience who are sophomores in college for internships at Blackstone, which I understand why we have to do that. I think it's ridiculous, but that's what it is. So people are forced to work so hard and to be so goal-oriented so early in their time that when they graduate school, which is just the beginning, there's a set of expectations on what they should be doing and how they should be treated. And I think Georgetown students come with a sense of humility and patience, and that the world is not to be given over to them just because they've survived the gauntlet of getting into school and getting an internship and getting into an analyst program. Because once you get there, once you've graduated, you have another 10 or 15 years to figure out if you're really good at the thing you've chosen to do. And you'll probably change either jobs or careers once or often twice. I had 3 jobs before I got to Blackstone. And so if you come in with this sense of like entitlement and I'm meant to be doing this and I should, then that the employer is not going to look as that kindly on it. So I think Georgetown does a nice job of teaching honesty, humility, patience. We're playing a long game as people and as professionals. And I think it's very important that the school keeps that culture. And I can say that they're really, in the people we hire at Blackstone from Georgetown, that is distinctive to them. And I think those are elements of the Georgetown factor that I discussed back in 2019.
Fantastic. Wow. What an opportunity to hear from the master himself, the master of private equity. Thank you, Joe.